You're listening to Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Join us as we explore how medical professionals can achieve stellar success in all areas of life. It's time to level up.
Hello, Dr. Isakson. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for coming over here. I'm happy to get you on my show. It's interesting, your history and your professional career is something that could offer a little bit of different perspective, I would say. So let's give the audience a little bit of an overview of your professional startups and where are you now?
Sure. And thanks again for having me. Currently, I am the owner and sole physician at Northstar Allergy, Asthma and Immunology, PA. I'm a solo allergy and immunology physician. I did pediatrics before I was in allergy and immunology. I've really had kind of a roundabout career so far. Originally, I did the typical pre-med kind of thing, and I was in physiology for my undergraduate. I had contemplated going right into medicine, but decided towards the end of my fourth year that I would try to take a look at science. So I went on to get a Master of Science in Biotechnology, but definitely missed the patient care aspect of things. So eventually made my way to med school. And I knew during med school that I would be interested in allergy and immunology, but in order to do that, you need to do a residency first, either in pediatrics or internal medicine or med peds. So I enjoy working with kids, and it's sort of a lighthearted environment. So I did that route and then did my fellowship in allergy immunology in St. Petersburg, although we cross-trained with the adult side in Tampa. And then I worked as the allergist immunologist out at MacDill Air Force Base for just under 6 years to help start that clinic. I had no military heritage, no background on that, but I knew I wanted to start something and to help them and continue that. And then ended up getting a Master's of Science in Entrepreneurship at USF at the Muma College of Business. And during my time there, I started and founded my own clinic just around the time that COVID was starting. And eventually that's how we got to here.
That's interesting. I want to explore a little bit more this transition about from your, I would say, from your residency and practice and being in the medical field with patient care to having a business route, so to speak, an entrepreneurship. What did it take for you to do that?
It took for me to overcome being restless and find myself in the position. I've had a lot of entrepreneurial ideas, and I have family members who are successful entrepreneurs. You for sure do not need a degree, an advanced degree, to become a successful entrepreneur. But I felt that for myself, with all the obligations that I had with my practice and family and so forth, that since this would be my first time out running a business, what I would do is I would go get a degree in entrepreneurship and learn from people who had 30 years experience in successful businesses and exits and so forth. And I felt that medicine was well in hand. Of course, it's a process of continuous learning. I don't mean to say that I know everything, but I felt like learning how to run a business on the topic matter that I had a good background in would be a more ideal way to go than perhaps learning how to run a business and then maybe launching spaceships into outer space at the same time. So I felt that was a more logical approach for me. So that's sort of how I made that transition.
Yeah, so how did it go? Like, how do you think a medical doctor is doing business in this field? Like, does it have to be anything special? Most of us don't have that kind of training, and even if you do something on the business side as far as education is concerned, most people don't have that kind of trait, I would say. What do you think it takes to run a business in medicine? Because it's very different.
Yeah, I mean, I think like many other businesses, it takes a growth mindset and an openness and a willingness to deal with uncertainty. Actually, when I've been sort of advising or counseling some folks who might want to consider opening a clinic, At least those of us that were in the old days when we did the very lengthy calls. I suppose the residency is a little different now, but I asked them one core question. And my question is, if you were, let's say, the second year out of a third year residency, so you're not, green behind the ears, but you're also not at the end of your training. How did you feel when you were the senior resident on call and maybe the ICU or a med surge floor when it's nighttime and there's no backup? I mean, of course, there's some fellows in house, and if you had to make a call to an attending, they could come in. But really, what stands between catastrophe and a good outcome is you. And I want to know from them, can you handle that stress? Do you thrive in it? Is it something that just is, makes you apoplectic? For me, I personally love the nighttime. There was really just getting down to things, taking care of it. Of course, there was a lot of stressful situations, but I felt that I could rise up to that. And it's nothing wrong to say if you can't, but you sort of need to know yourself a little bit. And so, what is it to run a business? Well, it's showing up and you find out that your staff, one of them, their child is sick that day and you're understaffed. And I find myself every now and then still giving injections and placing skin tests, and it's sort of going with it. So at the end of the day, I think it's a belief in yourself, and it's the right people. I feel that doctors have been sort of led to believe that we can't do this, but I ask them to reflect on the things you've done during your medical training. If you've never intubated a patient before, that's pretty scary. And I would argue that the negative effects of that are a lot worse than if you don't see a patient or two during the day. So I think it's mindset and the right people is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's very interesting. They don't teach business in medical school, but it's something that has to come from inside, I would believe. And it's one of those things that the more confident you are in your abilities to do anything, that's going to transfer into how you run your own business in medicine.
Yep.
Especially, if like yourself, you open a clinic and you have to do most of the things by yourself in the beginning.
Yep.
I'm sure there is probably some moments uh, along the way where you just throw your hands in the air and you're like, what did I do? Um, any kind of examples of those things?
Oh, sure. In the early days, it's like it's time to approve payroll, and you're trying to decide, am I going to get paid? Is my staff going to get paid? How's all that all going to work? Fortunately, we're sort of out of that phase, although we have other challenges, and you never really outrun the challenges. There's just newer and bigger challenges. But I think a lot of it comes down to resilience, for sure, and grit and fortitude. I think there's a bit of a misconception, maybe with some people, even to other doctors, that you hang your shingle and if you build it, just everybody's going to flood the gates and you're going to be the wealthy doctor who drives a Ferrari. It's not like that. You have to work, you have to hustle, you have to do a good job, you have to be ethical, and hopefully the successes of that come as a byproduct of all that. But I would say somebody again was fortunate to be exposed to that kind of stuff through entrepreneurial family members and honestly through sports when I was younger. Now, I'm not going to say that I was an amazing football player, but I did learn a lot on the field about team unity, drive, focus, resilience, grit, all those things. And those aren't lessons you can always learn in the same way in other environments. So I was fortunate to have that during my upbringing.
Yeah. Also, as part of running a business in medical field, probably one of the most challenging situations I would think is the way you deal with your payers, with your insurance companies,
Yes.
or you don't have to deal with anybody. So, which model do you choose and why?
Yeah, so I guess I would say we're a bit of a hybrid model. And well, first of all, the why allergy in certain areas can be a bit of a niche area. So certainly, I do have some state licenses, but I'm not licensed in every state. And most of our patients do use their insurance. I also feel like an inner responsibility to help patients that rely on their insurance and might not be able to access our level of care. if they didn't, and that sort of spans the spectrum. So we take, Medicaid, but some other tier plans as well. Um, it can be sometimes perhaps a little bit of a hard sell if you're putting somebody on 3 to 5 years of allergy shots to ask them to pay a subscription model, though there are certain models to it. There are definitely some cash services we can add on and do add on, and they're value adds. We're not looking to make anybody's life more difficult. So I think for those reasons, we have a bit of a hybrid model for what we do. Certainly, working with insurance companies is not easy. They definitely make it as hard as possible to sort of move the numbers around and deny things. But we try to work forward with good faith in mind.
Yeah, as part of being successful in your own practice is the notion of that person, the business owner, kind of live and breathe their own practice. From, first thing in the morning to the last hour of night. How do you manage your time? How do you kind of mix the professional aspect with like your personal life and maybe some hobbies or maybe some other interests?
Sure. Well, that's a good question. First of all, I'd sort of like to take a moment to address the idealized concept of work-life balance or life-work balance. Um, at least for somebody like me, and I don't always have the greatest time management skills, though it's something I've worked at. I don't feel that it's always like an even kind of thing. It comes to me in spurts, and sometimes it's a lot more work, and sometimes it's a lot more life. At the end of the day, my family always wins out, and that can make things tougher. So I find that sometimes I run in sprints or in spurts to get things done, and sometimes it means going on vacation, but still checking things to make sure that they're okay. I'm not yet at the point where I have a number of physicians working for me and everything can function without me, but we'll get there. I know that at the end of the day, my kids will have the memory of me sitting at their sports games and at their rehearsals and things like that. So that's 100% more important to me than optimizing every possible part of the business. But I have taken an active approach to try to work at these things and trying to get myself back on a routine. Certainly during residency, we have a routine. You wake up, you have morning report, pre-rounding rounds. So you know what you're doing. It can fall a little bit by the wayside, and as this stage of my life, but I'm really trying to be intentional about time blocking, about batching items together, about automating things where I can, about using smart systems. Now that some of my kids are older, I let them do some of the things around the house that I would have done. So it's a work in progress. And I'll put one final point on this. I'm a sort of big believer in optimization of tasks relative to certain times in the day. I guess biorhythms would be another word for it. So I'm much better and much faster at certain things at night than I am in the morning. And I'm learning to reshuffle what tasks I do at a given point in time so that my day is the most efficient. So I'll leave it there. That was a bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully it got to what you were asking.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting concept. And most people should know themselves better in this aspect because everybody tends to dedicate a lot of time to their business, office business and medical business in general, but they don't think about their own body, their own biorhythm, their own way of like diurnal hours of active actually work.
Sure.
But that's a good point.
Well,
Now
and
I
there's
want
a
to kind
great
of
book on.
shift the
Oh, sorry. I was just going to make a book recommendation for anybody who struggles with that, like I did. The book is called When by Daniel Pink, and it's sort of learning about your circadian rhythms and your biorhythms and what things you could learn to prioritize when. So it's helpful if you haven't figured it out on your own.
yeah, that's very interesting. I want to kind of shift a little bit towards the professional subject of your business. I think that here in the United States, this specialty is, I would say, very well represented, but in the same time, very important. for some reason, my biased impression is that we deal with a lot of patients in the United States that are your patients. And is this something real or is just a subjective impression?
Well, when you say my patients, do you mean allergy and immunology
Yes.
specifically? I don't think it's subjective. Well, first of all, I would say that if we're looking at things through the lens of an immunologist, which I try to, there's immunology in every possible part of your body. It's in the skin, it's in your eyelashes. So we don't own any one particular body system, and everything sort of I feel like gets funneled down to immunology on some level. I think there's a better awareness, either in incidents or maybe in marketing or both, about learning about allergies. It's certainly becoming at the forefront of things for food allergy, for example. So I don't think it's subjective. I think that maybe the awareness is getting out there and our diagnostics are getting better for picking up some of these things that we in the past just sort of called malaise or fatigue or itch or whatever it is at the primary level. And I was a primary care physician before this, as I mentioned, because I did pediatrics, albeit primarily in the pediatric urgent care center.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we deal with a lot of things in our food industry and also environmental aspects of toxins and all this type of things that can influence a response, an immune response from a patient. What do
Mhm.
you think is the main issue with what we're dealing with right now in terms of like, I would say importance for our health?
Oh, well, boy, I could go in a lot of different directions on that. I think I would say that our food, our nutrition is certainly at risk from outside exposures, things like fertilizers, pesticides, microplastics, and how that affects the immune system are very important. I think that probably we don't get enough schooling in that as physicians, and I would say even in immunology, we're taught sort of think in structured algorithms a lot, but there are a lot of other factors that come into play there. So that's one area I would say nutritions and perhaps some environmental things that make its way into the food sources that then go on to bring about immune or chronic issues or chronic inflammation. And that goes well beyond just wellness and longevity. And it should be viewed through the lens of science, in my opinion.
Yeah. Also, many people think that allergies are something that, they're temporary, I would say, right? It's either a seasonal allergy or you're having something, some type of food allergy or exposure to some kind of environmental chemical,
Mhm.
and it goes away with time, and they
Yeah.
don't do anything about it, or they just try to ignore it. Give me some examples in your practice of some kind of extreme cases that you've seen in your lifetime.
Well, in my lifetime, I can definitely say, first of all, in fellowship, we did a fellowship that was very, very heavily based in immune deficiencies, which are not common to start with. So, unrelated to sort of the day-to-day private practice, probably one of the most extreme cases I've seen was a genetic case where a patient presented to me with very low blood cells, sort of like recurrent infections, and silver hair, not gray hair, but silver hair. And they were originally of Haitian descent, and eventually over time their skin started to depigment to become almost on the white sort of spectrum. And as I mentioned before, immunology is in everything, and we ended up having to get a hair sample and send that off, I believe, to the National Institutes of Health and do a scanning electron micrograph of it. And as it turns out, the reason for all these things happened to be the internal cellular molecular machinery that moves the pigment from the base of the hair to the end, as well as in the skin, is some of that same stuff that's involved in moving important things for fighting infections inside the cell to the periphery of the cell to take on the invading, bacteria or viruses or whatever it is. So it's that common molecular machinery that was impaired that presented with all these strange kind of things that sounded like a house case. And that's somebody who needed a bone marrow transplant. And eventually all that stuff started to go back. Their pigment came back, their hair got better, the infections went away. So that's more for like tertiary care type of things. In my day-to-day practice, I would say, I don't know if I'd call it extreme, but I'm starting to see a lot more of mast cell activation syndrome. Whether that's environmental or not is a little bit unclear. There's certainly some genetics that are involved there. Unfortunately, we have some progress in the way of medicines that can help to address that, new ones on the market that weren't available to us. But at the same time, I think nutrition is playing a big role in a lot of this too. Certainly, there are these sort of low histamine diets, and the scientific literature is still figuring some of that out. But as I get older with this, I'm realizing that maybe there's a part of medicine that I haven't been able to focus on enough, which is sort of like deals with not natural, naturopathic, but it deals with common sense, basic things like foods and our daily regimens. And not everything needs to be complex medicines and injectables, but they have a place when we need to use them.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was a roundabout way of getting to what you were talking about, but hopefully I addressed it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Would you recommend any kind of test for your patients or general public to have, done in their lifetime to know about their food allergies or anything like that that they can help them?
Yeah, well, the one thing that I can say is that it's important to make a distinction between what's an allergy and what's a sensitivity and intolerance. So clearly, I'm not everybody's doctor here, and you have to speak to your own physician. But what I will say is, I have people who come into my clinic and they did some sort of home testing, perhaps with 200 different IgG like George tests for this food and that food, and they feel like they have to cut out everything. But when you're talking about allergy, you're talking about an IgE like Edward. And that's important because of how the molecular biology works and how an allergy starts. So we're able to often reincorporate a lot of those things. So first, I would encourage somebody to keep a food journal, figure out what might be bothering them, not just base everything off of a test. And then you can drill down and hone specifically what needs to be tested and work with your doctor to see what IgE, like Edward, tests need to be done to get you a clearer answer. I'll make one other point about food allergies. There are some people who quote unquote outgrow them, usually from childhood, but you can get an allergy at any point in time in your life. You could eat broccoli your whole life, and at age 80, you could get a broccoli allergy. It's a threshold event. It's not like I made it past this time and I'm safe or I'm unsafe. So you take every patient at their history, and then you really very specifically do the testing based off of that.
Very interesting. Yeah. Um, I want to go back a little bit to your mindset of running your own practice.
Sure.
Um, what's the end point on what you want to do with your own practice? What do you look for? What's the strategy going forward?
Well, I haven't figured out an endpoint all other than to say that I won't be able to do this forever. So at some point, somebody will have to pick up the reins. I have multiple ideas of what that might look like, but I can tell you in the short to medium term, I see us expanding and getting involved in clinical trials, and me being able to perhaps step back a little bit from the day-to-day operations of seeing every patient every day and fielding every phone call. Um, I read something a long time ago that says the more you focus on one thing, the more other opportunities present themselves, perhaps adjacent or otherwise. In the past, when I was younger, I was sort of guilty of pursuing all these different opportunities that were maybe tangentially related or maybe not. But now we're really focused on moving forward and building out the core allergy and immunology services, and then layering on more complex things, perhaps with some integrative medicine and good science and clinical trials. I think in those words, it's going to take us, a good amount of time to get there. And then I see perhaps adding some other staff members that I had not thought about doing in the past.
What about in terms of retirement? And this is more of I would say, a philosophical question
Sure.
for all the medical doctors that have their own offices. I'm just curious what your perspective is on this in terms of retirement and the fact that we we tend to kind of forget about that time that's going to come in our lives.
Yeah.
And very few people maybe prepare for it financially or plan for it. Uh, what is your view in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, my view is to be able to retire comfortably. That's obviously a vague term and it means something different to everybody. To me, that means to be able to travel the world with my spouse in relatively good health and see my kids and whatever comes out of any relationships they may be in the future. I can foresee myself if I'm not owning a place. Certainly, you'll find me someday in a log cabin at a ski hill with my feet up and a warm cup of cocoa. Hopefully be doing that. I want to have an active lifestyle. I did a lot of traveling when I was younger, and I'd like to do more of that. I'm a musician. You asked maybe perhaps about some hobbies. I've been a drummer for over 44 years, and I'd like to continue with that. And I'm sort of dabbling in guitar now. I like arts. Financially, you have to be able to do these things. I'm not saying, I don't feel compelled to have the fastest car in the world or necessarily a private jet, but I would like to know that I have good health care and healthy family members and able to live an active life. So that's sort of like the prospect of it. I can see myself when I get to be a little bit older and crotchetier, where I don't want to be in the day to day of this, but I'm not quite sure I would be ready to give up my hands in business or advising or volunteering. So I intend to stay active mentally and physically and see where that goes.
That's a great point. Um, well, with all your experience so far, professionally and I would say socially, right? For all the things that you've done so far in your life, if you would look back to yourself and when you started this whole thing, what kind of advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, definitely. I would start earlier than I did. There's nothing wrong with me having stayed in certain places. I got great training, but I was ready to deal with not being ready way earlier than I thought I was. And I'm sure you hear it a lot that people have to have things perfected before they go, but there's really an opportunity cost, and that's both financial, mental, and physical. And the reality, I think the biggest thing that came to light to me is you really don't have real world data until you start doing something. By real world data, I mean you have this business plan, but maybe it doesn't work out. And I don't mean just pivoting. I mean, you have to start figuring out how to optimize, how to refine. Why isn't this working? Why is that working? I didn't think that was going to work. So I would say start early so you can start generating real world data and carve your path and moving forward and adjust as necessary.
Yeah, that's a great advice. Um, well, I kind of want to end up with this generic question that um, I want to ask you about. What do you think the main ingredient for someone to be successful is?
Sure. I think the main ingredient is a willingness, and more than just a willingness, a desire to learn. Um, Even though I have medicine fairly well in hand at this point, of course, I have a ton more to learn. I'm not saying I know everything, but you have to constantly be ready to upskill, whether it means in your chosen profession or whatever new technology comes out or a new way of looking things. And you constantly have to sort of red team yourself a little bit. When you walk in a room and you're so confident about something, sometimes I have to stop and say, what if everything I know right now is just not true? Even though it's worked for 20 years, how am I going to change? What do I need to do? Who's the next person who's thinking about our concrete ideas in completely different and abstract ways? So I would say an open-mindedness and a desire to learn, not just a willingness. That's the main essential thing. If you got that down and you can interact with good people and find your right people, you'll be okay.
That's awesome. How can people get in touch with you? Learn more
Sure.
about your stuff and maybe get some advice.
Absolutely. Well, as far as our clinic's concerned, we have a website. It's Northstar Allergy, all one word, .com. I'm on LinkedIn. I think we have a Instagram and Facebook and some of those kind of things. We have both a clinic page and a personal LinkedIn page. So if people want to connect with me there, they're welcome to. they're welcome to call us. We pick up the phone in this day and age too. So 727-222-1879. And we're happy to help out where we can. And if we're not the place for you, we'll try to point you in the right direction.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Isakson. I really appreciate your time, and I I hope people can learn something from these ideas and maybe look more into your work.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on.
Are you a busy medical professional striving to excel in life and work? Stellar Success Podcast brings you the habits and insights of top leaders in medicine and beyond. Discover strategies for balance, growth, and fulfillment in every episode. Follow us on Instagram at Stellar Success Podcast for daily inspiration. Start your journey to success today. Subscribe to the YouTube channel now.
That's a wrap on Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Interested in joining us? Go to stellarsuccesspodcast.com/guest to apply. Stay stellar and level up.